Welcome. So, should the government determine how much time you get to spend with your newborn? Welcome to Deep Dive. I'm your host, Rachel Campos-Duffy. The Federal Family and Medical Leave Act entitles eligible employees to take up to 12 weeks of unpaid, job-protected maternity leave. But is that enough? Or don't all mothers and fathers across the nation share the same parental rights? Why does where you work, how long you've worked there, and what state you live in impact the length of your leave? Now, some think that a government-mandated leave plan will benefit all workers, but surely one blanket ruling won't work for all businesses. After all, a butcher doesn't operate the same as, let's say, a bank. So should the government get involved in parental leave? Joining me to discuss this very important and personal topic is John Stossel, Emmy-winning reporter and author of that article that inspired today's conversation titled, "Must Parental Leave Be Dictated by the Government? Can't we say something isn't government's job?" We also have with us Brad Micklin, lead attorney and managing member of the Micklin Law Group, which is a family law group focused on men's and fathers' rights. And of course, we have my friend Leslie Marshall, Democratic strategist and Fox News contributor. Thank you all for being here today. So let's just get right into it, because this is a big topic. Ivanka Trump is leading the charge here from the administration. She says that parental leave is not a woman's issue. It's a family issue. Some would say it's a national issue, that our children and our families is a national concern. What say you, Leslie?
I actually agree with her.
You agree with Ivanka? I love it.
on this, yeah, and I like her shoes. But
me too. I'm with you on that.
So there's two. Okay, listen. As a parent, I didn't have as many as you, Rachel. We're not in competition, right? No, I have two kids. My kids are 11, and my son will be 12 on Friday. And I have to say that, and my son is adopted, and I say that because I remember when I adopted my son, and I said to my boss, I kid you not, I'm so excited. I'm on my way to the airport to pick him up with my husband. And my boss said, take the afternoon off. I was like, I get 12 weeks unpaid leave.
Right.
And he said, but you've adopted. I kid you not. There's different ideas and mentalities. So I actually think it's...
So that was 12 years ago.
Yeah.
Do you think that would happen today?
No, not as much. And that's one of the reasons I brought that up. Families are different now, too. Yeah. And they're recognized as being different. We don't always have a mom and a dad. Yeah. Sometimes it's two moms, one mom, two dads, an extended family. So I think it's essential that leave is there for both, or for whatever parental unit or units that there are, and especially when women are involved. If they're breastfeeding, you can even breastfeed your adopted child. I did. You take lactation pills. Sorry to gross you out, guys. So early.
Wow! All these years I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I know you can take lactation pills, but here's the thing. I also am part owner of a 24 surgeon medical group, and I can talk to you about employees. And one of the things that we see when people first have children, especially the women, but the men as well, is there are a lot of absences. The morale goes down because we're not required to pay them for that leave. So to me, it's sort of like saying we value the family, we value the parent or parents. And in addition to that, there were just test after test that show the beginning and that bonding and the breastfeeding just has such benefits to the baby, yes, in addition to the parents.
Absolutely, I agree.
I agree. I mean, there aren't many people or employers that don't support some form of the Leave Act. The problem that we have right now is everybody's looking for a cookie-cooker approach to it, saying we got the Trump's plan, we got every candidate running for office with a different plan. We have to first look to each state government, different types of employment before we can really fashion a plan that's going to work. It's not going to work for one plan for everybody, and I think that's where the mistake is right now.
John, do you agree with that?
No. Well, it's not going to work, but why is everyone talking about we? We're all individuals, and yes, it's great to have parents take time off when the kids are young. It's probably great to take some time off when the kids are teenagers, when they say, we don't want you around, but they really do.
Oh, come on, John, let's be honest. I mean, we're talking about breastfeeding and maternal bonding with the child. Not the same as, like, I'm sick of my kids.
It's not the same. My point is just that the more time off, the better. But government means a one-size-fits-all rule. Government means more work for lawyers like Brad.
Which is a good thing.
I want to put him out of business. This should be a decision between individual employers, and Leslie, I'm happy to hear you're an employer now and learning about all these regulations.
I've been an employer for years. I have 2 companies. I have a media company and medical company.
Okay, well, you must agree that these mandates eat time and money that your business could be spending, making itself better and serving.
But so do
better.
absences and turnover. That's another thing. High turnover. You're talking about 3 months, and doctors will say breastfeed for up to a year. Sorry, guys, Rachel and I got you on this. You know, I'm sorry. I could pump for a year and would not have enough to my kid would have starved to death. And so it just doesn't
But
work.
let me ask you this. Let me quick ask you this though, because John brings up an interesting point. So you're a business owner. You happen to also be a business owner who's a mom who's very sensitive to this topic. Do you need the government telling you as a business owner to do this, or are you better off just kind of your people are going to work for you because they know that you're that kind of a person and you're going to provide that kind of benefit to them?
Well, we do
right?
in my companies, but that's not the majority. And even with the Family Medical Leave Act, you have 40% of the workforce that isn't even eligible for that. Right. So that's problematic. Look, anything that you have from the federal government is never going to address the needs of over 300 million people.
Correct.
Period. I mean, Social Security doesn't. Medicare doesn't. Speeding laws in various states don't as well. But to me, you have to have something because there are employers out there who take advantage of their workforce. There are people who don't even
work
give
for
the
them.
12 weeks.
Right.
Well, that's easy
But
to
should
say,
the government pick up the slack for those people who maybe don't have the privilege of working for a company that is like that?
No, because it hurts women. Because when you pass these laws, yes, some people get family leave, and that's great. But other people don't get hired. In California, which passed the law, women of childbearing age are less likely to be hired.
Is that a fact?
One study found that.
Well, there's a lot of
cited
issues
here.
about that.
In Europe, where they have these rules, women are less likely to be in high-level managerial positions.
In Europe, but John, in Europe, in Germany, for example, and other countries outside of Europe, Australia is another one that off the top of my head. They have 1 year paid maternity leave, and your job, not just your job at that company, that exact job is guaranteed, is held for
But
you.
everything
And
that
that's
you're
a terrible idea
But you're
because they
both
don't
talking
get
about
hired.
Unequal protection of the law. Whether it works in another country or not, like you're saying, you can't have the government imposing a program that is utilized more by women and paid for by government only for larger businesses.
You see this as a gender thing. That's very interesting. Let me ask you this, though. Would you say that at this particular moment, we have a great economy. The labor market's very tight. Won't employers want to keep their workers happy and offer these kinds of services, maybe tailor-made to the butcher, to the bank, to whatever? Isn't that a better solution?
I think
Yes.
so. I mean, you have things like the increase in minimum wage, which may not necessarily impact the class of people we're talking about, but we're creating a system where employers are now required to put out more benefits. They're offering better benefits. They're offering better wages. Unemployment is down. So there's more competition for the few spots around. So the companies that are offering paid leave may fare better at getting the employees than the ones that don't offer.
Yeah, but you were just talking about who it benefits and who it doesn't. If
Well,
you
I
just
think it benefits everybody
If
to
you
some
look at our,
extent, except
but if
the
you look at our
employer.
current structure, the people that don't have a problem, especially who are eligible for the Family Medical Leave Act, are people who have largely have secondary education, so they have a job that's at a company that does allow them the 12 weeks off, and they have the money to be able to afford to take that 12 weeks off. That isn't the case for people for people who are living on and struggling with minimum wage and working 2 or 3
But we're
jobs.
also talking about whether or not it's paid or unpaid, too. I mean, right now we have largely unpaid, and the programs
this
that are being
would change
promoted,
that.
right, which will increase the burdens across the board for both the employers and the insurance companies, and I think the state government.
But let's look at something else. I mean, you brought up this idea of, it benefits women versus men.
I didn't say benefits. I said it's utilized.
It's utilized more by women. But I would,
Right.
I would argue,
I wanna get a lot of hate
and
mail for this.
I know, yeah, you guys are both going to get hate mail. I would argue that children who are well bonded with their parents, who don't go prematurely to daycare, where we know that there are some negative effects if they go too early. And we know the medical and physical benefits of breastfeeding, which it's really hard to do, as Leslie said, if you're going to work right away. So all of those are things that benefit the country as a whole when children are doing better. Would you argue against that, John?
No, it's great. I just say government doesn't need to mandate it, and when it does, the unintended consequences are always worse than the problem government meant to fix.
Fair enough.
Right. It's not a question of whether we need the program, it's a question of who's going to pay for it.
So there's all these different programs, and since we're already on the topic of sort of, let's say get government, we can put up really quick what the Family Leave Act, the one that's most talked about, offers. We have a screen of that. So that 12 weeks unpaid.
Look at the bottom of this graph. If you have one employee, oh, sorry, that's the wrong graph. Never mind.
You have to work 1 year for the company, and the company has to have at least 50 or more employees. But let's talk a little bit about the Rubio-Ernst one, because this one, it doesn't actually involve the government mandating anything. It is that the employee says, listen, I need this time. And by the way, they can take the time off. They can take time off, or they can take the money from their Social Security by deferring their receiving those payments. They can also apply it to child care. So they can take a deferral or wait longer to receive their Social Security check and use that money that they would have taken towards parental leave time or towards child care. Anybody have any thoughts on that plan? Because that sounds a little bit like a good compromise.
I don't like it. I don't like it because, obviously there's always questions about Social Security and there's arguments as to how solvent it is and for what period of time. One, two, to me it's sort of like punishing you. It's sort of like, well, if you have a kid, you got to work longer. And it's really hard for any of us to say because, when you're in your 20s, your 30s, or even 40s having a child and, you feel young and healthy, you really don't know what the future brings and if you're going to be able to work past 65 or if you're going to be able to work to 70 or 72. So it's almost like if you want the time off now, you got to pay. You got to pay later.
Well, if it's not solvent, I say take the money now. Take your leave time now. It's not going to be there when I retire anyway.
Right.
But anyway, go ahead.
That's the worst part about it is the people who are paying in the Social Security now are really compensating those that are receiving Social Security.
Yeah.
So if we're going to allow them to tap into their Social Security, we're going to make the people that are receiving suffer and hurt the funding problem we already face. And then decades later, funding won't be there for those that are paying into it and using it now. The system's just not made for that.
And I would say it's better than the other plans. It's less evil because it's not mandatory. But we're already $22 trillion in debt. Social Security is unsustainable. This would require a new bureaucracy to monitor the people. I'm taking out this much from my Social Security for this. And many of them then later on will say, oh, I don't have enough in my Social Security. We have to raise taxes again. Why complicate life more? Why do they always want more government? It's huge. It's 40% of the economy, and they always want more.
And so who's they? Because this brings
Leslie.
No,
and Brett, all the lawyers,
I'm with you almost.
and the Democrats, and now the Republicans.
Because this is such an interesting. Because if we can just kind of think about this in a different way, what is the purpose of government? The purpose of government is to serve the people and for the will of the people. When you poll this, John, people like it, like by 60-some%. And so sometimes my beef with libertarians, listen, there's a lot of things I like about libertarians, but sometimes I feel like they're so ideological that they forget about that the whole purpose of this whole government is to do what's best for the people.
And to your point, this is an area where you could get bipartisan support.
You
could get something
there is bipartisan support.
You could get something done. There's a win in the column for Democrats and Republicans, and the people are so frustrated that there's such gridlock in D.C. still that nobody gets anything done. This would be something that they could do together.
Right.
If the people like it, right, if you've got over 60-some%, is that not worth it?
No, it's not worth it. The people like lots of stuff. People like free college and free cell phones.
You don't have 60% people that want free college.
That 60% drops substantially when you tell about who's going to pay for it. When you say to the 60% that's in favor, well, we're going to raise your taxes for it, then that drops to 40%.
But you're paying for it either way, and let me tell you why.
Who's paying for it, though?
We, the taxpayer, because what they show in the research is if you provide this across the board instead of leaving 40% of people out, because there's a lot of people that work for small companies. My media company has less than 50 employees, for example. The women, many of them will go on public assistance. And so, when you have somebody who is working, minimum wage, or they're working in a company with less than, 50, they're not making, a very large paycheck, they're going to look to public assistance, and you're paying for it.
It becomes a slippery slope, though, Leslie. I mean, and that part I agree with John, because then you could say the same about child care. You can say and the government should just do everything.
Government programs always grow. A new government program. Yeah. But I quarrel with your definition that nowhere in the Constitution does it say it's government's job to serve the people. It's government's job to keep the peace, and I would add some pollution control rules. The founders didn't think about that. But government isn't there to give us stuff.
Well, there I got to differ with John just a bit, because we have the Commerce Clause, which is what allows them to do this. The question is, should they do it? You know, the question, again, always comes down to everybody, especially as we approach an election year, is in favor of this, but nobody wants to know where to pay from.
Well, you bring up a good point, because in the Europeans provide parental leave, as you talked a lot about, Leslie. Democrat presidential candidates like Bernie Sanders, Kirsten Gillibrand, they all say this isn't going to cost the government or the taxpayer very
Of course
much.
they're going to say that. What else are they going to say on election
And they
day?
always say it.
Right.
Bernie Sanders is going to cost $1.12
Yeah,
a year.
that's what he said.
He
Yeah,
meant
but-
per month, but it's already higher than that in California.
But anything that you want, I mean, you know, if you want your roads to be paved, if you want your streetlights to be working, if you
local
want your
government.
first responders to come up,
Local government.
John, whether it's local or federal, you're still paying
Well,
for
there's
it, and you're
also
paying for your
individuals.
taxes.
But if you poll most of the large businesses, they're not necessarily in favor of
Of
it.
course, businesses are
So-
never. I know those big companies where the
let's not
CEOs
go
are
poo-poo
making
big companies.
7 digits
And
and
they're
have
the ones that
6-digit
and they're
parachutes,
not
even if
covered by
they
this
screw up and get
program at
fired.
all.
It's just awful.
Well, I mean, if you talk about loss of income for companies, Leslie thinks that her company's more productive because your companies are based in California.
Mm-hmm.
So she thinks her companies are more productive and she's able to retain workers.
It increases morale. It increases productivity. It decreases turnover.
So why do you
it
need the government to
decreases
force you to do
absenteeism.
it?
Well, and I think
You
you
know,
don't
and
get
I,
the
and
same
I don't
employees.
agree. I mean, I understand that, you know, some people say, oh, well, they're not going to hire women. Well, it just doesn't show that. We have more women in the workforce now than we ever have. So,
Well, yeah, but that's because it's a disproportionate number than we've ever had. That doesn't mean that they're not underrepresented in this sum, though.
well, I think we're underrepresented in some fields, but I don't think that's because somebody sits there. Well, I'm sure there's somebody who's sexist in their mind is going, oh, she may get
Well, see,
pregnant
because I
in any
disagree,
field.
though.
but
I think
there-
I run a
That
small business
happens.
also.
That happens regardless.
Yeah.
I think I get a smaller pool of qualified, not that my staff's not great, but that I get a smaller pool of qualified people because I don't have to offer this and I can't quite afford to do that. So I'm losing a large pool of people that would rather go somewhere else where they know they have this protection as opposed to a small firm. So it doesn't actually help. us not to be covered.
I think about this a little bit philosophically, and maybe I'm biased because I'm the mother of soon-to-be 9 kids, and it's something that really matters to me.
Yeah.
And I look at this and I say, our policies ought to reflect our values. And as a country, do we value families? Do we want to make it easier? I mean, you see in other countries in Europe, they're importing kids, families that have more kids, and there's all these other unintended consequences, John, from some of the mass immigration that's happening in Europe in order to get more workers. Why wouldn't we make it easier for families to have children when we know these children are the ones who are going to make Social Security more solvent? They're going to be the future workers. They're going to invent the cure for cancer. Why wouldn't we just support families and say, as a country, we support families, whether you're Democrat, Republican, let's come together and find a compromise like this Ernst Rubio bill, which I think sounds really reasonable. Do you not value, is that not something that we can come together as a nation? Or are your libertarian
No.
sensibilities just so rigid that you can't
Yeah,
think
you
beyond
can,
that?
you can call it rigid. Government is a clumsy instrument. There are things it's important that government do, but we should have limited government because we're all free people with different needs. And when it's not a mandate, companies can innovate. They can be more flexible. What has Europe produced that's new in the last 50 years since they started doing these things? Facebook, Google, all these new companies came from the metropolitan areas farthest from Washington, D.C. It's no accident. It's because the bureaucrats hadn't even discovered them yet to crush them. So leave people free and we'll produce better stuff. And half the country's women. Companies want to hire women and want to do the right thing by people having children.
Trust people.
Well, and you can't ask John if he supports family. Of course, it's like cross-examination. Yes, of course we support family. I keep coming back to the same issues. Everybody supports the plan until you talk about where it's getting paid from. Is it going to be from taxes? Is it going to be from Medicaid? Is it going to be from taxation?
And then
your
next
support
round,
drops,
all the
and people like
lawsuits
John go
and the
up
money
in
going
arms.
to him.
All right, final word, Leslie.
Oh, all I think is that I think that the benefit outweighs, and I disagree when you say when people don't want to pay for it. There are things that people want to pay for. I think there's a larger segment of the population now that are very realistic and have woken up to the fact that if we want stuff, we have to pay for it. And if it's passed, even if you don't want it, you're still going to end up paying for it one way or the other.
Leslie, Brad, John, you guys have been incredible guests. I'm sure you're leaving our viewers with lots and lots to think about and ponder. and maybe even lots to write John and Brad about. So thanks for joining us today.
9 kids?
Yes, 9
Yeah,
kids.
that's amazing.
John, Brad, thank you again, and thank you all for coming today on Deep Dive. I'm Rachel Campos Duffy, and tune in tomorrow for another Deep Dive.